the median income of a full-time male worker in the United States today, median means half above, half below, median income of a full-time male worker is lower than it was 40 years ago. So, you know, they see prosperity. They don't want to admit that somehow they're not partaking of what is going on. The American economic machine is actually not delivering for a very large share of Americans. Just another, you know, the things have been much worse since the crisis. Just a couple, again, to put things in perspective. Median wealth in the United States, you know, which is a better statistic of how well you can manage. Median wealth today in the United States is as low as it was 20 years ago. And that means all the increase in the wealth that has occurred in the last 2 decades has gone to the top.
How can people not realize this?
Well,
and why don't we do anything about it?
Well, part of the reason is actually, while we have first-rate universities, the average quality of our education system doesn't stack up. You know, there are standardized scores that look at the U.S. educational system and other educational systems, and we're just mediocre. So part of the problem is the same thing we talked about before in why we are performing so poorly in equality of opportunity, is deficiencies in our in our education system more generally. So people don't understand it. But there are 2 other things that I think that are important to. One of them is that I think Americans have been sold a whole set of bill of goods. They've been told, for instance, that you could only get more equality by giving up on growth, rather than the point that I'm trying to make in the book, we can have more equality and more growth. Another interesting...
In fact, that more growth is dependent on more equality.
Exactly. And
which is a concept that rarely gets mentioned in the discourse.
What's interesting about China is they've made enormous strides at reducing poverty. By different estimates, 400 to 500 million people have moved out of poverty. At the same time, inequality as measured by the standard wage Gini coefficient has increased a great deal. And, you know, I just came back from China, and it's very clear, very high on their political agenda is a concern about growing inequality. So their political leaders are taking on the issue of inequality in a very serious way, because they realize the adverse effect of inequality on political and social stability and on economic growth.
Is that because they're listening to you in ways that, you know,
our leaders I think they are maybe listening to me. I mean, I did meet with the leadership, but
Told you.
But I think there's a broader consensus in the society, and it's you know, there's always a disparity between rhetoric and reality. They've been talking about a harmonious society for 10 years, and the statistics keep looking worse. And they say, look, if we're going to have the confidence of our citizens, we have to start delivering. And so I sense a renewed commitment to deal with some of the problems of inequality that have gotten very serious over the last 5-10 years.
And how do they compare to the inequality that we have here?
It's a tight race for, you know, and there are different aspects of inequality. Remember, they are still much poorer than the United States. Their per capita income is probably less than 1/5 of the United States. But they're growing very rapidly. You know, maybe their growth is going to slow down to 7 or 8%.
We've slowed down far more than that.
Yeah. So, but even at that slower growth rate, they will become the largest economy in the world in the not too distant future. Their per capita income is still be lower, but their voice in the global economy will be larger. We can actually get a better functioning economy and an economy with less inequality, a society with less inequality, a better democracy, if we provided better education for all, if we change some of the rules of the game. So I describe in the book what we need to do in a whole variety of areas: bankruptcy law, monopoly, antitrust law, financial sector reform, corporate governance. There's no single magic bullet that will turn the economy around. We need to invest more in not only education, but also technology and infrastructure. It's hard to do that when you have a society, the politics is divided as the United States.